Hey guys, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In this episode, I get in contact with Pete from North Carolina, and he is not afraid to talk about his Sasquatch encounters. He enjoys the outdoors and likes to craft Native American bows on his spare time. He has many encounters and experiences to share with all of us, so let's not waste any time, and let's dive straight into this Bigfoot interview. Hey Pete, welcome to Sasquatch Theory, and I appreciate you being on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good, Miguel. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. Enjoying the nice weather. If you could, would you tell me a little bit about yourself and the encounters that you've had in North Carolina?
Well, my name's Pete Adkins. I don't care who knows. I worked mainly painting and carpentry and worked for a power plant for about 15 years. I'm retired now. I used to do a lot of hunting and fishing along the rivers here, a lot of canoeing and stuff. And I got introduced into the Bigfoot phenomenon was me and my son went in together and bought some land on the Dan River here in Rockingham County, North Carolina. We are in north central North Carolina, and there's several other big rivers that come through here, including the Dan, the Smith, and the Mayo. But we bought some land on the Dan, and I just mainly bought it. It was 11 acres. I just mainly bought it for a little getaway spot, someplace to go fishing, kayaking, maybe do a little hunting. I couldn't gun hunt, mainly bow hunted there, which I love the bow hunt. But right after we first bought the land, people would come to us and ask us, could they go catfishing at night? And I told them that it would be fine, just, be careful and don't leave no mess. So this it was a Cherokee woman and her family come down and ask me, could they go down at night? And I had a couple of friends that wanted to go with them. And I would tell them, like I told everybody else, just be careful and pick up your mess when you leave. So they went down one night, and it was about 2 weeks. I run into this lady, and she said, the night that we went down there catfishing? I said, yeah. She said, did you come down there that night throwing rocks and limbs and sticks at us? I said, ma'am, I have to get up every morning at 4 o'clock and go to work, get ready to go to work. I'm heading out the door at 4:30. And I haven't got time. I mean, I just got better stuff to do with my time and throw rocks at people. I told my son about it, and he sort of laughed too. I said, did them people get drunk or something, or getting high down there? He laughed. I said, but, later on, I come to respect these people. They were really good people, Then I had some more people that would come to me, and asked me to go down there fishing. I told him, you know, go ahead. So there was one fella, he come and wanted to go fishing. I said, yeah, go ahead. I seen him maybe a week later too, and he said, I'm never going back down on your property at night again. And I said, why? He said, well, I was sitting there fishing, had a fire going, and I heard a woman screaming. He said, it sounded like a woman screaming. And he said, I actually thought it was somebody getting killed or murdered or something was going on, this woman screaming. So he said, I dropped the rod and reel and started going towards the screaming. But he said the screaming was coming towards me. And he said, as it was coming towards me, I heard more screaming in behind that, and then screaming directly across the river from me. He said, I had a bad feeling come over me, like I've never had. And he said, I dropped the rod and reels and run. Well, I told my son about it, and he said, well, that's sort of strange. And I said, yeah. I said, you know, maybe it was a mountain lion or bobcat or something, you know. And they were calling back and forth to one another. But, and, you know, for him to throw down the rod and reels and run, you know, it bound to be real intimidating. And, well, not long after that, the first girl and her family had come down there, her husband and his father and grandfather and his boy went down there fishing at night. Same spot right there in the upper end of my bottom. And he told me that when they were down there fishing that night, something was walking around up on the riverbank screaming at them. He said they left. He said they'd never heard nothing like that. He said that he'd been out west in the desert, in the mountains. He said he'd never heard nothing like that. And he said, I'm never going back down there again. Well, I told my son about it, and we just, you know, I just shook my head, you know, what the heck's going on? Maybe it's somebody playing a prank, or maybe it's mountain lion or something we got down there or something. So, but anyway, as time went on, my son, he put a few cows in there and a horse, and the people across the creek from us, they owned a 100-acre bottom in there. They asked him if I could bow hunt. And I said, y'all can come over here and cut the hay off, leave enough for us, and take some for yourself. He said, that'd be fine, Pete. And me and my son started hunting there. But anyway, I loved to bow hunt. I didn't care nothing about gun hunting. And it was one year of the season. I think it was around 2002, might have been. I went and put a tree stand up. Well, the following week in North Carolina, you can bake. You can put apples and corn. So I went over and put some apples and some corn near the tree stand. Well, while I was there, I walked about 10 yards up the hill from the bait pile and shook the stand. You know, just make sure everything was all right. And no sooner than I did that, I turned around and walked back down the hill to the four-wheeler. And I looked down on the bait pile, and there was a half-eaten apple on the bait pile. And I'm going, somebody is messing with me. I looked around, never seen nobody, never heard nothing. So I just took it as maybe one of the people that was in that family that owned the bottoms there, you know, was messing with me or something. I just shrugged it off, and I left. Well, it was later on that season, I put a blind up in the corner of my bottom next to the creek and baited it. My brother come down there some and hunted out of the blind. Well, I went down there one morning to get in the blind. It was still dark. And when it got light, I looked over in the corner of the blind, and there was a half-eaten apple in the corner of the blind. I said, somebody's messing with me. You know, I just shrugged it off. Well, I threw that apple out of the blind back on the bait pile with my brother. He went down one morning, got in the blind. He was doing a little bow hunting, and he said, "You been eating apples in the blind?" I said, "No, I ain't getting them nasty things off the ground eating them." And he said, "Well, it was like somebody took a bite out of an apple and threw it in the blind." I said, "Well, somebody done that to me. They've done that to me twice. Once in the blind and once over on the other bottom up there where I was hunting." He said, "Somebody's messing with you, ain't they?" I said, "Yeah, big time." I said, "I mean, it ain't really," I said, it ain't really bothering me. Somebody's just, you know, messing with us, you know. But I remember my son, he wanted to do a little bow hunting with me up there on the across the creek from my property up in the 100-acre spot there. And he put him up a ladder stand out in the corner of the bottom out next to our land. There's a big river cane thicket in there. He put that stand up, and it was about when season come in, he asked me if I wanted to go down. Me, him, and my younger son go bow hunting that opening day. I said, "Yeah, let's go." So I had moved my stand up on the bluff overlooking the bottoms. Well, that opening morning, we went down. It was a long dirt road going into the spot. And it was a few trailers down on the end and one old house there on the right. But when we got there, the dogs were going crazy. I mean, they were going absolutely crazy. And I'd never had that problem before. So told my son, I said, "Those dogs barking at us." He said, "No, Dad." I said, "No, they're not barking at us. How many times you been in here?" So we went out. This bottom was like it had like hedgerows going down lengthways and long ways out to the creek and to the river. And when you top the hill going up, it's like an upper bottom, and then you got the bottom down here, the river bottom. So we split off, and I told him I'd meet him back here about 11 o'clock. We'd head on back, maybe come back that afternoon. Well, as we were splitting off there, I told him I'd see him later. I went up and got him a stand. Well, I'd skirted a bedding area and went real slow, got up in my stand, didn't spook nothing, because I knew the deal was bedded down, and there was a lot of acorns in there, and they bedded down up on this. It was a field and a fence, and then you had the bluff that I was hunting on, and back beyond me was a bedding area. Well, you can still hear these dogs barking, and I was sitting there in my stand, And I said, I heard some walking coming up the hill. Somebody walking. And all of a sudden, the deer just started going crazy. I mean, they were blowing, snorting, running every which way. And I'm going, what in the heck? So I said, I bet you money that's Michael. And Justin, you know, it was his first hunt going out in the dark, and he's probably scared or something. He wants to go home. So, but whatever it was, you know, it was coming straight towards me. And I could hear it walking. Then when it got right below the stand there, I thought it was Michael getting ready to tell me they were going on back home. He'd come back and get me at 11. So all of a sudden, it was like this real whiny, like somebody, like some type of language or something. You know, it was just like a, you know, just I can't explain it. And I stood up on the stand and put an arrow in the nock. This was in the dark. Well, whatever it was, it walked off down the hillside back into the bottoms. And it was loud too. It was loud. And at 11 o'clock, I went and met my two sons. And I said, did you hear that up at my stand? He said, yeah. I said, we could hear it all the way out here, Dad. So, you know, I really didn't. I mean, you know, it was sort of weird, but I really didn't think much about it. You know, I just let it go. But as time went on, I would say it was probably around mid-2000s. We went down one morning. My son asked me if I wanted to go muzzleloader hunting. Opening day of muzzleloader. I didn't really want to because I love to bow hunt, but I guess that was close to primitive too as you can get. So we were. It was real cold that morning. It was in November, and it come up a real hard frost that night, almost like a light snow. And we went down into the big bottom. He went out in the corner, and I got over in another corner. I got behind some big hay bales and sat down. Well, right at light, here come two does running across the bottom, and then here come a big buck chasing her. Well, I reached for my grunt call, and I must have dropped it coming down there, but I made sort of a grunt myself. I went, like that, and the deer, that buck stopped, and he come running straight towards me. And when he did, he turned sideways, and I popped him, made a good hit. Well, I waited. It was about 15 minutes. Here come my son out across the bottom. He said, "You get your one?" I said, "Yeah." I knocked him down. I hit him good, and he took off. But I said, "I've hit him good." Well, we tracked the deer. We had more blood on us than the deer had in him, because the deer was running through brush and small saplings and stuff and getting the blood all over that, and we was getting it on us, tracking him. So we cut along this hedge grove, and it went into another bottom a little ways. Well, we found where the deer had laid down and bled out. And we looked around, and my son said, Dad, where's your deer?" And I said, "Well, he was right there, but he's gone now." And I mean, he bled out. I mean, it ain't no question. You can see where he'd laid down on the in the straw and mud and pressed it down. and wasn't no deer there. So we looked around. We went in all different directions. Nothing. Not even a drop of blood. Nowhere. So I told my son, I said, something got my deer. Somebody or something got my deer. But there were no drag marks. So I thought it, I told him, I said, it ain't no drag marks. I said, somebody got this deer. They picked it up and walked off with it. They knew we were hunting over here, and they had to see that deer come across. But there was nobody in that bottom. We never heard nobody. Never seen nothing. No vehicles. Heard no four-wheelers. Just quiet as a church mouse over there. So I just sort of shrugged that off as somebody got my deer. Well, as time went on, I don't know how it come about. We got on the subject of Bigfoot somehow. And, I just, sort of shrugged that off too, because I didn't really believe in them. But my brother told me that me and him was the ones that was talking about it. And he said he was at he took his dog to the veterinarian. He said, he asked that doctor, the doctor, the veterinarian, and his assistant, she was standing there with him, and said, Doc, what's your stance on Bigfoot? He said, well, I don't think there's no such thing, because they'd done found a body by now, or they'd have more proof, something like that. So he told my brother he was going to fix his dog up, and he come up there and get him later. So he went up there in the office waiting room and sat down, and he looked around, and the girl that was standing there with him, she had shut the door behind her and closed the blind, said, my husband has seen one in the Draper River bottoms. And this guy, he didn't live too far from me. So I went and asked him, what did he see? He said him and a boy went down there one day. They went down to do some fishing over the bottoms that we were hunting in. And said that when they were coming out, just as they were getting ready to go out of the bottom, back down to the road part there coming in, that a rock comes sailing out of the woods up towards that bluff and landed at their feet. Well, they looked up, and standing about 30 yards from them, he said, well, something standing beside a tree looking at them. Said it was huge. It was about 8 foot tall, covered in like a red chocolate type hair or something like that. And said, this thing, it just stood there and watched them. And he said, it was like a bubble come over me. And he said, we got the heck out of there. He said, this thing was huge. Said he said, one of the things I noticed, he said, if you're looking at this thing in the daylight, it had like black eyes. It's had partial hair on the face. Couldn't really make out, that much facial details, but, the eyes, sunk in eyes, huge brow ridge. Was covered in, said you could detect a little musty smell. And he said, this thing followed us all the way along as you're going out, this bluff goes around and goes back into a field. And this thing walked along that bluff watching them. Right after that fella had that encounter, I told my son what he had told me, and my son just sort of laughed, and I said, well, I don't know either. I said, either we're dealing with a bunch of crazy people or something's going on. So it wasn't long after that. I'd hunted a few more times, and we had moved. We sold the river bottom, and I moved to a new location on the Smith River. Had a lot of privacy there. It was like living at the cabin. But the guy that owned the big bottom there above me, he still let us hunt. Well, I remember one morning I went down to go hunting. It was early season, September, bow season. And I parked where I usually park to go out into the bottom there. Well, as I topped the hill to go down into the bottoms, it was just like a wall of stench just hit me. And I mean, I'd never smelled nothing like that before. I'd been in the woods all my life, even around cows and stuff. I never, pigs, grew up on the farm, horses. I never smelled nothing like that. It smelled like real, like a urine, musty type of animal, something dead. But it was just like right on top of me. Like I was standing, whatever it was standing right next to me or in the woods paralleling me, you know, sort of parallel to me. And I just had something come over me that morning, and I said to myself, this is not a good morning to hunt. And I turned around, I don't know why, but I just went back and got in the car and I left. And after that, I never went back in the morning anymore. Because I sensed something was wrong. You know, I'd never smelled nothing like that, and I just after that I never went back in the woods anymore in the morning to hunt. I always went in the afternoon because I like to see what's around me. I was doing some reproduction work for the Museum of Natural History here in Rockingham County. I was doing some reproduction work, you know, arrows, Native American bows, pottery and stuff like that. I asked the landowner, could I go out there and pick some of the river cane? He said, you can have all of it if you want it. So I told my son, he was off that day, and I said, you want to go out there with me and we'll pick some river cane? So we went down and parked. They were doing some work right before you get into this area. It's like a substation there. And it was just remodeling this place. And we went on past that, and there was some loud noise and stuff, you know, jackhammers and stuff. And we parked the car. And as we was going up this road bed to go out you go over a little rise there. And as soon as we got up over that rise, it was something standing there. It was about 8 foot tall. I really didn't get a good look at it. It was just so much movement. It wasn't just that. It was just all around us. This thing, it was just like a split second. This thing was gone, and it was going through the brush, going up the hill, up that bluff. And then out along this upper long bottom, you could see something running. And it was going I've never seen nothing run like that. And it was just so much stuff going on, it didn't hit me what I was seeing. You know, I was just trying to take all this in and what is this? And so we kept going, and we go out to the bottom. It's still not hitting me. What's going on? You know, what did we just see? So like what did I see? But I'm going out here to get some river cane. We're going out. And I looked at my son, and I said, since we've come in this bottom, have you seen anything? He said, yeah, Daddy. Right over on that hedge grove. About maybe 75 yards from us, there was something standing in between two trees. It was solid black. And it was watching us get that river cane. Well, I told him, I said, I don't know what it is. And I said, it ain't bothering us and we ain't bothering him. Or whatever it is. I said, you just keep on getting the river cane. I'm going to get as much as I can. Then we're leaving. Whatever this was standing in between these two trees, it was huge. It was solid black. You could see the conical head, the pointed head, sort of, broad shoulders. And it stood there the whole time watching us. As we were going up, I watched this thing. I kept an eye on it. And as we were going up to hit the road to go out, whatever it was that was up on that hill, it come down and was running on all fours down that dirt road. Running on all fours. I watched these things run on two legs. One of them run for 100 yards on two legs. The other one run up the hill just in a flash. The first one we seen on two legs. And then when it come down, it was running on all fours. Why it was running on all fours, I have no idea. The only thing I can think that is it wanted me to think it was an animal, some type of a bear or something like that. But it was huge too. Well, me and my son, we still talk about that. And like I said, I don't care who knows. I know what I seen. And after that, I sort of become obsessed with it. I wanted to go out and hunt these things and look for them and everything. But little did I know that the place that we were moving to would prove to be another place too. We all these it's like two rivers that runs through this town here. A lot of tributaries, a lot of creeks, and you know it might be 10 or 20 miles to the next town because it's just so bottomland, country, hills, bluffs, river bottoms, all kind of stuff. And it's just a lot of open area where these things can live. But, you know, I can sit here and tell you all kind of stuff, you know, looking back on it now, experiences that I had when I was young and always brushed it off. But I knew what happened. I knew what it was. The new place that I'd moved to, where I made, I say it was in March of 2007, where I worked at, I was working night shift, and I got off a little early that night. I had to go pay some bills the next day. And I left the plant at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got home at 4 o'clock. And when I got out and shut the door, up the river there from me on this bluff, something screamed at me 3 times. And I had no doubt what that was. I mean, it just was echoing up and down the river. And it did it 3 times. We got to where you'd hear this thing, you'd hear it during the day. And my daughter would walk down to the bus stop. So I finally put an end to that because I'd heard it a couple times in the morning, and I didn't let her ride the bus anymore. I'd go take her to school. And I just didn't, whatever it was just too close for comfort. And I knew what it was. Later on that March, my son, I was off one weekend, and it was on a Monday night. He said, Daddy, come out here and listen to these coyotes. Well, I go out the door. I'm going, what in the heck is that? I said, son, that ain't coyotes. I said, that sounds like what I heard over on that hillside one night, because I told my family about that. And my wife was going, you're crazy. you're crazy. You know, you're hearing things or something. But anyway, we taped it that night. We didn't have a tape recorder, but he had a phone, digital phone. We taped it on. Digital camera. We taped it on that digital camera, and it was pretty. At first, you couldn't, you could hear stuff, but it wasn't, as good as a tape recorder or anything like that. But I had some people come and they fixed it where you could hear it good and everything, blew the sound up, and they were all struck by it too. You could hear a tree knocking. Right across the river from me, there was a dog kennel. These dogs were going crazy that night. I'd never heard them bark like that. You'd hear a tree knocking, the screaming, and the dogs going crazy. And the screaming was coming from all different directions. Across the road from me, there was an old 100-acre park in there that nobody went in. You hear these things up the river on both sides, down the river, and then across the river where the majority of the screaming was coming from. But what struck me was a tree knocking. And I knew what that was. That went on for years. I think one of the things got one of my dogs. We let her out one night and she never come back. I think one of those beings or whatever you want to call them got my dog. I don't think they like dogs. My wife, she told me she seen one morning. She was sitting, there was nobody around us except for the dog kennel across the river. There was nobody around us. It was like, I lived on a highway I lived right on the river. It was like 20 miles from my house up to the next town along the river. 100-acre park that didn't nobody go in. There's another 2 miles, 2.5, 3 miles to town, back down the river. There was nothing around us. It was like we lived there for 12 years, but she told me she finally come out and told me she seen one. She was at home one morning, and she was sitting out on the front porch. It was a day off. She was sitting out there in the sun, and she's sitting in a swing, and back across the road at that park entrance, she said she seen one come out of this rhododendron thicket down near the gate and stand there and watch her. She said she went in the house and locked the doors. She never did tell me till recently, but she used to say that I was crazy. I said, yeah, now you crazy just like me. Over the years, I've heard of other people's encounters here along the Dan River. One guy told me that he was looking after a farm for a fella and had permission to go on his farm and look after it. And he said he was standing there talking to the guy, and he said, yeah, I don't care if you come over here, just make sure, just see anybody over here, run them off. And he said he was getting ready to walk off, and the man told him, said, Milton, I want to talk to you for a minute. He said, don't come over here when it's raining or foggy. He said, why is that? He said, that Bigfoot will sneak up on you. And that was right down the river from my older property where people had the encounters and I had mine. And then later on, this guy told me he found a 20-inch track along a creek bed on that property. And he said that he had heard also that these men had seen something, and he wanted to talk to one of them about what he had seen. And he met him one morning. He didn't really know who he was. He'd heard that this guy had seen something. And he went in, he knew his wife worked at Hardee's, and he told her that he wanted to talk to him, and she said, well, he'll probably be in here later on. So he waited, and he come in. He introduced himself, and he said, I've heard you've seen something on this fellow's farm. He said, I'm not talking to you. He said, why not? He said, I'm just not talking to you. He said, well, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you one time. He said, whoever goes over there and walks on that farm has got one or two things in them. Either they've got the devil in them or they got the Lord. He said, well, why is that? He said, me and my buddy right here, we was over there squirrel hunting, and we were going up this bluff, and he said something, it was some boulders up on that bluff. He said something come out from behind them boulders and got behind the tree, and then it stood out from behind the tree and was watching us, standing there. He said this thing was gray, had gray fur, and he said it was about 9 foot tall. He said it would have broke you in half. They would have never found you. Now, anybody that goes over there and walks around that farm has either got the devil or the Lord on them. And he said, that's all I got to say. He said, we don't go back over there no more. But I'd heard of other sightings, and, you know, it's just so much stuff that goes on here. I think there are a lot of sightings around here that people, they don't talk about it because they're afraid to talk about it, and afraid of ridicule or whatever. People laughing at them. I made a mistake one time. I told some law enforcement about it, but after that, you know, I become the Bigfoot man, you know, ridicule, you know. Well, one day I was up at a store, and there's this deputy's father talking to this guy, and he said, there comes Bigfoot, trying to belittle me in front of this man he was talking to. And this is a real funny thing right here. It made my day. The guy he was talking to said, sir, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, yeah. He said, I seen one on my grandfather's farm when I was 14 years old. It was picking apples out of an apple tree. It turned around and looked at me and walked off. And he said, I'll go to my grave knowing I seen one right there. And that deputy sheriff's daddy, he looked like somebody poured hot grease on him. He didn't know what to say. So that made my day right there. But anyway, that's pretty much what has happened to me here along the Dan River, and there at my other house too. I think this area probably needs some good research. I don't really go out and look for these things no more. I used to have people go with me. We'd listen, and a lot of it, you know, I'm not saying all Bigfoot hunters are full of junk, but some of them are. And I just let it go. I know what I've seen. And one of the things that I really noticed, that when I was hunting sometimes, this is the one thing that it really caught my attention. The woods would go quiet. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. It's just like all the sounds were just sucked out of the woods.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's just I've experienced that 3 times. And that's one of the weirdest. They say that when you hear that, one is nearby. I don't know. I didn't see one, but I know that these sounds were sucked. There was no sounds. That's got to be one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. Like the woods were just dead.
Yeah. Okay, Pete. Well, I appreciate you sharing your experiences with me, and I kind of wanted to run through your story a bit. Okay, so you started off experiencing activity on this 11-acre property?
Yes, sir. It was first it was people that were coming there at night catfishing. You know, they people coming there at night building fires, and I think one of the, you know, as I got into it more and more, I think that when you build a fire, it attracts these things. For some reason, they don't like fire. And I can tell you, one more experience. I forgot to tell you this. I'm getting older now, and I forget a lot of stuff. But right before we sold the property, my son and some of his friends, they went down there one night and go catfishing. They built a fire. He said they got down there right before dark. They grilled out, and he said they built a fire and catfishing, and finally they just sort of retreated back up, to the truck. We had a picnic table out in the corner of the bottom, and it was they were sitting around. Everybody had left except for my son and one of his friends, and he said they were sitting there, and he said his buddy fell off asleep, and he said it was about 2:00 in the morning. He said he heard something real loud hit the river. He said it sounded like a big rock or a log hit the river. And he said he was sitting there listening, and then he heard it again. It just kept getting, whatever it was, it just kept getting closer and closer. He said it sounded like logs or big rocks hitting the river. And he said it was about 3:00. He said it was real close. The splashes in the water. And he said at first he thought maybe it's a herd of deer going across the river or something. But he said no. He said it's just like one big splash. And he reached over and grabbed his buddy, shook him, and said, "Did you hear that?" And he said, no sooner he said that big splash almost happened just a little ways up the river from where they were at. And he said, his buddy said, "What's that?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "Let's get the heck out of here." And he said his buddy didn't even bother to go around getting his door. He went through the window. He said, "Let's get out of here right now." And my son had a 357. He said, "I want to see what it is." He said, "No, we're leaving right now. Let's go." And I guess that was an intimidation factor set in on him, or the unknown factor. That happened right before we sold the property.
Okay. So it sounds like a lot of the activity is based around the wildlife, specifically the deer and the river.
Yep.
And a lot of your stories that you told, I think almost all of them were next to this river.
Oh, yeah. There were other things that went on, too. I'd heard from people, and I'd even witnessed this with strange lights in the river bottoms at night, too.
Yeah.
At first, I thought it was coon hunters and, somebody coon hunting. You'd see a light, but it never deviated. It was like the lights were just floating. I've seen them from beach ball size down to maybe size of a softball.
And how high
floating
off?
Along the river bottoms, and other people told me that they'd seen them too. I think that was one of the things too that really caught my attention on this in these bottoms too. Was the orbs and the lights.
Were they high up in the sky or low to the ground?
They were not real low to the ground. Some were, but some were sort of up a little ways, but not real high.
Okay. And did they make any noise? What color?
Not a thing. Not even a peep. You didn't hear nothing. Not even a hum or nothing. That's what was weird too. I'd watch these lights and I'd say, well, maybe it's somebody coon hunting. They carrying a lantern. But if it'd been somebody carrying a flashlight, you would have seen it deviate, or these were just floating orbs of light.
Yeah. And were they like an orange red color or blue?
Bluish white. And I seen one that was white, that's about the size of a beach ball.
Yeah, that's unusual.
And my brother had seen them too.
Yeah, and being that it's close to the river, it's probably an area where the Native Americans used to dwell at.
Oh yeah. Back in I can tell you the bottom where I told you where my deer disappeared from after we found where it laid down, bled out. Right there in that bottom, from what I understand, back in might have been in the late 1960s, early 70s, a big flood come through there and washed out a village site, from what I understand. But at the time being, they didn't know that. You know, people don't know anything about archaeology. You know, they're not trained to understand anything like that. So they found it was like 20 or 30 burials that had washed out of this bottom. And they thought maybe somebody had been murdered or it was an old graveyard in there or something. They were trying to identify them, but there were no records, nothing. They couldn't identify them, so they called in the state archaeologists, and it was a huge village site there. And then right across the river, there'd been some stuff that I'd heard about going on in that bottom. The Indians that lived there were called the Sara. They were a woodland Siouan speaking people. And they had these big fortified village sites, you know, with the palisades around them. And also there's a couple mounds on a creek coming in to that bottom across the river.
It sounds like the Sasquatch are used to looking for hunters and listening for gunshots or wounded deer possibly, so they can come in and steal the kill.
Yeah, I think that could be a possibility. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think they're an opportunist type creature or being, and like us, we see an opportunity to get something, we're gonna do it. So
yeah,
and if you're a hunter gatherer like they are, they don't hunt like we do, but they hunt and they gather. So that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah, and I think hunters are more out to experience activity because they're more involved with nature. They're putting up trail cameras, looking for the best deer trails, looking for the best deer, and they're spending a lot of time out there, opposed to people that just want to get into Bigfoot and just walk trails and walk through the woods. I think hunters have a better chance because they're seeking out the same resources that the Sasquatch are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I've met people that were Bigfoot hunters, and they couldn't tie their own shoes. And in the first, I had a rock thrown at me, or I heard a tree knock, or I had I heard one scream or something, and they've never been in the woods. They don't, I had this one group that wanted to come out on my property, and I let them come, and they knew more about it than I did, and I was the one having the experiences, and they were telling me what I experienced, and I'm going. It was sort of like putting the words in my mouth,
I experience that all the time. They want to call me and tell me, that they can see the trail cameras and they know they're there and they know everything that I'm doing. They can read my mind, but they weren't there for the experiences and the encounters that I had. And that's kind of why I told my story, is because, I was able to sneak up on these things, and they were hanging around the trail cameras, but just not walking in front of them. It's not like it scares them off, but it seems like researchers don't really know much about wildlife, and they're so quick to insert their opinion that they've heard from other people and other resources.
Yeah, there's another couple of things that I forgot to mention. Mm-hmm. When we moved to this other place, up on the Smith River. Like I said, we had no neighbors, nothing there. Just the river. The only neighbor I had was across the river there at that. It was a dog kennel. They groomed animals there. If you went on vacation, you could bring your dog there, and they looked after them. But as I got into this thing, I had heard tree knocking on several occasions. Well, one night I thought I would chime in, and I will tell you this. I will tell you, do not tree knock. If these things are tree knocking, don't you get involved in it. And I will tell you this, I had the fear of God put into me. And I was on my own property. I could hear these things knocking, and I told my wife to go down and get, I had one of them Louisville sluggers and another piece of wood. She went in the basement and got it and brought it back out. I was sitting there listening to these things. She said, well, I'm going back inside. So I started knocking, and up on this bluff above me, across the road, across the highway there, you could hear this tree knocking. Well, I thought I was going to chime in with them. So I tree knocked a couple of times, and thought I'd communicate with them. The knocking stopped, so I kept on. All of a sudden, I heard something like it was shaking, like a bush or a tree shaking. You could hear the leaves and the limbs. And I'm going, what is that? They went from knocking to shaking trees. So I could hear stuff rolling down the bank down below my house towards your bridge. It went across the river there, rolling down that hill. And I said, what in the heck is going on? And then it hit me. They're throwing stuff across the highway down that bank. They were throwing rocks. And then the tree, I just sit there for a minute. It got real quiet. You didn't hear the tree shake. Then all of a sudden, I heard something go, crack, boom. It broke the tree at the base. I didn't know it then, but I got up and I walked in. The next day I went up there, and there lay that tree broke at the base. A green tree. I don't want no part of that. I don't want no part of that.
Yeah. And
later on, we got moved out of that house. They were going to build a new bridge there, and the state come in and claimed eminent domain and bought the house from us. But right before we left, this was another unique thing. I'd heard of people talk about it, but I never experienced it. I remember one morning, I had a big deck that went around 2/3 of the house. You could go out and sit and look down at the river. It was in the fall, early fall. It was nice that morning. Me and my wife had got up. I'd fixed breakfast. We were going to go out and sit on the deck and eat some breakfast. Well, right before she come out, I was sitting there. I heard a whistle up on that bluff where the tree got broke. And then straight across the river, I heard another whistle, long drawn-out whistle. And this is like 6:30, 6:45 in the morning. And I'm going, okay. But I've had a lot of experiences, and you go ahead and you ask the questions, and I'll try and answer them best I can.
Okay. Yeah. And at a certain point when you were hunting on this property, you found some apples that were halfway eaten at the bait pile, and then you and your son were finding them in the hunting blinds. Do you think they
Me and my brother found one, and I found one in the blind.
Yeah, your brother. Do you think they were getting in the blind, or were they possibly just tossing them in there?
Yeah, I left one. I would leave one of the, you got on these hunting blinds, you got like mesh where you can actually leave the mesh up on it, keep you camouflaged. And I would pull that mesh back and leave it sort of air out, and they were throwing apples in the blind through that window.
Yeah, that's unusual. And almost every time you'd experience the activity, you would hear the dogs going nuts all around the area.
Well, the one time we went in when I was hunting on the Dan River. We went in one morning to go out, and that's when I heard that thing come by my tree stand that morning. The dogs were going crazy. The deer were going crazy that morning. And then at the other home across the river from me, when that activity was going on at night, the dogs in the kennel, they were going absolutely bat crazy.
Yeah.
You could hear these, and it was nothing around that kennel either. It was just a road up in there to a cinder block building. You had the outside fence, then you had the inside kennel there where they kept the dogs. And those dogs were going crazy.
And when this unknown creature walked about 25 feet from your stand and you could hear some type of sound it was making, what do you think it was trying to communicate, and what do you think it was doing?
I don't know. I just think that it was just letting me know it was there. I don't know. It's sort of weird. The sound it was making, I can't really, I tried to imitate a minute ago, but it almost sounded like it was like coyotes will howl. You'll hear them, like I don't know. It's hard to explain about coyotes too. You know when a coyote's around, but if that was a coyote that morning, it'd have been more interested in the deer than it would have me.
Yeah.
Whatever this was, it wanted to make its presence known. I don't know what. I don't know. All I know is it happened to me. I got up and stood on my stand and knocked an arrow, but then it walked on off down the hillside. It was walking on two legs. It wasn't no animal. It wasn't no four-legged animal. It was walking on two legs. You can tell.
And at what point did you realize that these things were possibly Sasquatch?
When we seen them. I've never seen, the one when we first come up over the hill there and it run up that hill up to the top where that bluff is. It was just so quick. When I first seen it, you could see the hair on it. You could see the ripped muscles in its chest area. You could see the muscles just like it was day and night. This thing was ripped. Huge shoulders. By that time, it done turned its head and it was going up the bluff there. And it was just so quick. And you're looking at it and you're going, it ain't registering with you what this is. And you're going, what did I just see? And then you see the other one running out along this upland bottom, and I never seen nothing run that fast. Nothing. I haven't seen a horse run that fast. I haven't seen nothing run that fast, even a deer.
Yeah, and you mentioned one of them was using all fours. Do you think they typically use all fours?
I think they do. I think they, if this one was running on all fours, then I think they all do it. I think it's sort of a mechanism to throw you off what they are. They don't want you to see them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what did the movement look like when you saw it?
It was like, I don't know. It was weird. It was like this thing was, it was like it was galloping. It was like a galloping motion.
Yeah. And do you feel
and the front part of the animal up towards your head was down towards the ground more. I've never seen nothing run like that. Especially the one running out along the bottom. And then when we went out into the bottom, I don't know if it was the same one. He cut up and went up along the edge of the bottom we were in. He was about 75 yards. He was already there waiting on us by the time we done got halfway out into the bottom. I didn't know it at the time, but when I looked over at that hedge growth, I felt like something was watching us, and there it stood, 75 yards. It was huge. Standing in between two trees, you could see the shoulders, the upper body. Lower body you couldn't see so much because it was the foliage was hiding it. And but where it was standing in between them two trees and the big bottom end behind it, you could see it. I mean, it was just like day and night. You could see the conical head that everybody talks about, and I mean, there it was. My son, he was tore up. He was going, "Let's get out of here, Dad." I told him to calm down. Just we go on. It ain't bothering us, and we ain't bothering him. I went on and got my river cane, and we left. And then when we were going out, that's when I see the one. It was evidently it done come down, and it was running out along that upland bottom in there, where the other one had run and went out and along that hedge grove and was watching us.
Yeah, and you kind of feel like they were trying to run you out of the area?
No, I really don't. If it was them putting apples in the blind or like that day I went over there to check my stand, put out the bait, and I turned around. I mean, I walked up a hill 10 yards and just shook my stand and walked back to the four-wheeler in the bait pile, and there's a half-eaten apple. Never heard nothing, never seen nothing. Now, I think if something like that wants to hurt you or run you off, it would have run you off. Don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. So you kind of feel like the screams that you were hearing around you were them communicating back and forth?
Yeah, I do. The tree knocking, the screams. And I think if you build a fire along these river bottoms at night and you have an experience, like these people were telling me what's happening to them, they were going down at night catfishing and building fires. They were having experiences, and I think this is just my thought on it. I think fire, when they see a fire, we rule the day, they rule the night in these remote areas. And if you build a fire, they're going to come.
Yeah.
They're curious. They're curious animals or creatures or beings or whatever, and they come. Especially if you're in a remote area, they're going to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like the activity possibly follows you around, or maybe there's a clan that follows you, or do you think you're just going into the right areas?
Yeah, I think I'm just going into the right areas. I've experienced the woods being silent in both of those areas that I told you about, the two areas that I lived in. And there was one other area that I experienced the woods going silent on me. I leased some land not too far from where I was living the second time, and I experienced the silence in the woods there. No sounds. That's got to be one of the weirdest things I've ever experienced. There were no birds, no crickets, no squirrels, no nothing. Not even you could have heard a pin drop 100 yards away. I mean, it's how quiet it was.
And you mentioned that your wife had an encounter and it took her a long time to finally open up and tell you. Could you tell me a little bit more about that Sasquatch that was standing next to that fence?
She said it come out of the rhododendron. It was a rhododendron thicket. And right across the highway, there's a gate that goes in up into this old park. It's about, I say it's close to 100 acres in there. And she was off that day, and she was sitting out on the front porch swinging. And when she swung back, she looked over at the gate. And the SASQUATCH or whatever it was standing there. And at first, she told me it looked like a man in a scuba diving suit. You know, that's what she thought at first. Why is somebody standing over there watching me swing? And she done it 3 more times. She said when she swung back the second time, it was crouched down watching her. But she said then it dawned on me that when the sun was hitting it, it was causing a sheen on it. She said this thing had like clean hair. It was like clean hair. And the sun was hitting and causing a sheen. She said it was covered in fur. And she said on third time it was still standing there. She went back. She got scared and went inside and locked the doors. And then she went to the window and looked over, and it was gone.
Yeah. It sounds like she was being watched.
Yeah. She was. She used to say that I was crazy. You know, you're crazy. And I think that she didn't really want to come out and tell me about it, but she finally opened up about it. And I said, well, there ain't nothing wrong with that. You seen it. I believe you. And we've had all kinds of experiences here, and we were about overdue.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your dog went missing. Would he go off into the woods or down to the river?
No, this was a little pet, house pet. We let him out every night to go use the bathroom, and he'd come right back. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'd stand there and wait on him, but this night Justin let him out, and Justin said he didn't come back, Dad.
Yeah, that's unusual for a small house dog that's used to being inside all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he'd use the bathroom, just come right on straight back, but I thought that was sort of real odd too. I believe in them. I've seen them, and can't nobody. People laugh at me, and now I laugh back at them. You know, I don't let it bother me. I know what I've seen, what I've heard, and I tell people.
Yeah.
I've got friends that go hiking by themselves, and I tell them, you watch your surroundings. When you go out in the woods, you watch your surroundings. I said, you know, when I was growing up, you really didn't, you know, you heard of the Patterson Gimlin stuff, you know, and maybe the Yeti over in the Himalaya, and that was about it. But now the sightings are getting so more infrequent, you know. It's like taking a drink of water. I remember when I was a kid, you know, it was, you know, there was no deer around here. They sort of migrated in or whatever. The state put them in here, but, you know, we thought that was the coolest thing to see a deer track. And now the things are just it's so many of them, and they're causing diseases and everything else. And I mean, you know, they ought to have a hunting season all year round, in my book. And now these things are getting, the sightings are getting frequent. And I know there's probably a whole lot more people out there that have had sightings, but they're just afraid to say anything.
Yeah, I know a lot of people from North Carolina don't like to open up and share their stories. It's kind of similar to Missouri.
I don't care who knows. Let me tell you something. I've had people laugh at me, and I laugh right back. And the biggest thing out of all this was that day that deputy sheriff's father was belittling me in front of this other man. That was the heyday of it all. This guy was, what do you say, Bigfoot, and laughing. And this man he was talking to said, sir, I'd like to talk to you. And he told me about his sighting. And that just made my day.
Yeah, made
Be
you
careful
feel...
how you laugh at people, because they might sit it back in your lap.
Yeah, it makes you feel vindicated when someone else is on your side, when someone else is trying to belittle you.
Yeah, I know where this guy, he grew up on his farm, and I've heard of other sightings there too, people hunting. I know a guy, he said that he's seen one on the side of the road in that area one night going home. But I've heard of so many sightings here. There's a town about 14 miles from here, Madison, North Carolina. There's a guy got a bait and tackle shop there, and this guy was telling me about his sighting. And the guy that owned the store said, I wish you'd shut up. I wish you'd shut up. I said, you crazy. You know, 'cause he was sort of belittling this guy, but he told me about his sighting, and they were up on the Mayo River, and where they were at, that's a pretty remote area back up in there. They made a state park out of it now, and this is on back up towards the Virginia line. And he said him and this guy were down there fishing on this guy's property, and said they'd made a fire. They were fishing that night. He said it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, you know how a fire, will light up the area around you. So they were sitting there fishing. His buddy tapped him on the shoulder, said, look right over across the river. There's a man standing there watching us. He said, it sure is. And he said that this man starts wading the river, coming across the river to him. And he says, it got closer. The light off of the fire, he said, this thing had red eyes. And he said, if this is a joke, it's done gone too far. He said, no sooner he said this thing let out like a howl scream. And he said, he shot it. He said, I shot it. He said, I shot it 3 times. He said, that thing let out a scream. He said, they left everything there. They were going to camp that night. He said, they left the tent, the rod and reels and all. So they left there. He said, about 3 days later, they come back. Said that the camp was tore up, where they had the fire was tore up. The rod and reels were broke. The tent was like ripped to pieces. And he said, he said, we went back to see. He said, everything was broke. He said, we just left it.
Yeah, sounds like a bad situation.
Yeah, I think when you build a fire, and it's going to attract these things if they're there. It's going to attract them. And I tell people that go out now, and they tell me they're going fishing. I said, don't build no fires. They'll look at me like I'm crazy. They said, why not? I said, I don't tell them. I said, well, you'll find out.
And do you feel like the Bigfoot like to move when the weather is bad? For example, if it's foggy or if it's raining or windy? You mentioned that a little bit earlier.
I don't know. I just think they're there. I think these things are so quick. That's another thing that I noticed when this thing was running. They're so quick that you can't. It's almost spiritual in a way. I mean, these things are like, they're a trickster too. I believe in the apple deal. They're like tricksters. They're messing with you in a way.
Yeah, letting you know that something was watching you while you were using the area.
Yeah, or we know you're there, and or maybe they were gifting me too. Like you left some apples here, and we'll eat a part of it, and we're gonna give this back to you. Like they were gifting me. And I thought about that too.
Yeah, and to me that shows a high intelligence level, and they're able to think beyond any animal's capacity, similar to a human.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think these things wanted to harm me. They could have. One we seen on the hedgerow standing in between the two trees. Oh, I have no doubt if that thing right there, it was so fast, you couldn't have got away from it. You couldn't have got away from it. It ain't no way.
Yeah.
I don't know. You hear a lot of people missing now, going missing in national parks and state parks and forests and wilderness areas, and I don't know if they're doing it or something else is doing it. It could be people doing it, but or somebody making getting inside over the head. When they go in the outdoors, a lot of people get in over the head. They go in for like a 3-mile hike and and disappear. Or don't know. It's just it's a mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think the Sasquatch are? Where do you think they came from?
Well, you hear so many theories, and I listened to something not too long ago, and it was in an area you never thought that stuff like this would have went on. You might have heard about it since you research it. In World War II, in the Solomon Islands, have you heard about this?
I'm not sure yet.
You're gonna have to look this up. I mean, my father was in World War II, and he was a tail gunner on the B-25, and he flew missions in the Solomon Islands, Guadalcanal, and the local people tell of a race of giants. And there were 3 kinds. There were real tall ones. They said they were about 20 foot tall. There were a medium size, maybe 15 down to 10 foot, 8 foot. And then you had the smaller ones, 8, 9 foot tall, 7, 8, 9 foot tall, that looked sort of like an ape and covered in hair. And they talked about the same thing too, about people building fires and they would come towards your fire. And that was and they said during World War II that some of these giants and ape-like creatures run the Japanese off of the islands. And they said these things had like a red fur, a black fur. And when I read that, it just, snapped. I said, good day in the morning. Don't build no fire, man. Do not build no fire in these remote areas. They'll come right to it if they're there.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like the activity is happening all over the world.
It's like you hear there in the Solomon Islands that this gold mining company from Australia wanted to mine gold there, and they got permission to do it and paid to do it. And one of the bulldozers broke down, and the blade broke or something. One of the arms on the blade, they took it off. Well, they took the bulldozer back to put another blade on it, and when they come back the next day, the blade that they had took off was gone. And they were up on this mountain near the jungle, and they walked into the jungle about 100 yards away, and there it was, the blade. Something had drug it or threw it. And they found these big footprints. But if you ever notice, a lot of all over the world there's tales of giants and giant-like creatures. And if you really want to know what my opinion about it is, I believe this is my opinion. And I don't care what people think. It tells about it in the Bible. The angels come down and mated with the women of the earth and bore giants.
Yeah.
Or genetic, or whatever you want to call it, genetic misfits.
Yeah, it's very possible, and I've heard a lot of theories that are very similar.
You know, it could have been something that's been on it. You know, the Native Americans had hundreds of names for them. Yeah. And right here in North Carolina, the Cherokee had two names for them. Judicula, the slant-eyed giant. The Noon Uniwee, the stone man. They had several names for them, you know, and it's one thing that's always caught my attention, you know, about Native American settlements and stuff. You'd have the living area, and you'd have the huts they lived in, or the wigwams, or the thatched huts, and then right around that was a stockade. I knew Indians warred on one another, but I mean, some of these stockades, I mean, it was elaborate work. It was more work done on the stockade than it was on the actual village itself. Were they just keeping people out? Or were they keeping something else out? Yeah, I think it's a whole lot more that's gone on or went on here, and people don't let on about it. You know, I guess they afraid of ridicule.
Yeah, and before I get off here, did you mention the name of the river, or did you not want to mention it?
Name of the river is Dan River.
Okay, Dan River.
All right. It's a Siouan word. Mm-hmm. And it's not pronounced. They call it Dan River here. They spell it D-A-N. But I read a book one time. It was the name was of Siouan origin. And I had a friend out in Minnesota that sold me bow staves. And I asked him, he was a Brule Sioux and Mohawk. And I asked him, did he still speak Siouan? I said, well, I got a word here for you. And he said, they call it D-A-N. He said, it's not pronounced Dan. And it's pronounced Don. And it means off of the top. That's where the river comes from, out of the mountains.
Oh, okay. All right, Pete. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share all this information on the channel and to talk about it openly.
Yes, sir. No problem. I don't care. I know what I experienced, and I don't care who knows. And like I said, you laugh at me, the laugh might be on you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Pete. Well, I'll get in contact with you later, and we can talk more about hunting and the encounters that you've experienced.
Yeah, I need to. I was sitting here thinking about some more, but we'll let it go at that. And you call me back, and I'm gonna finish up a bow today, and I'm gonna send you a picture of it when I get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another reason I was wanting to call you and talk a little later. But yeah, we'll get into that later and end the show here. But all right, Pete.
All right then.
Yeah, you have a good day, and I appreciate you taking the time to share all your experiences.
All right, thank you, Miguel.
Yep, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, another one logged down in the books. It's really hard trying to find people who are willing to share their experiences with others, especially if they've had an eye sighting. Pete was great to work with, and he had a lot of activity to share with everyone. I have seen the Bigfoot use all fours before when I hit him with a spotlight. I honestly thought it was deer because the eyes were low to the ground and the heads were all bobbing. This is a story that I have touched on a few times here and there, but I have never shared it on the channel. I have about 2 or 3 other incidents that I have never even told on my channel. I plan on making a video of all my Bigfoot encounters and experiences here in the near future, and I will walk everyone through the entire situation and show you guys everything that I have found here in Missouri. If you guys enjoy these types of videos, please like and subscribe and hit the bell notification. Alright, that is it for now, and I will catch you guys on the next one.